She gave to her. Paranormal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. How you doing tonight, Allison?
Doing well.
Glad to hear it. I've got some news for the world. Did you know that there's a 7 a.m.?
Yeah, actually, I am aware that there's a 7.
I was aware of this 7 p.m. time.
Yeah, you were not aware of the 7 a.m. time.
But this week I found out there's a 7 a.m. I had to get up and be awake at that time.
Don't do it again.
My body wasn't pleased, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Now, let me say, this is not because I'm a lazabout.
You've already got 4 hours in for the day.
At least.
When I wake up at 6 o'clock.
I'm up working. Mm-hmm. And I do mean that. I'm working. I'm not goofing around. I'm not the kind of guy who lays around and watches TV. If I'm awake, I'm working on stuff. But my natural body rhythms tend to, like, I get creative, like, after midnight. I stay up till 4 a.m. working on various things, either the podcast or if I'm writing a book or illustrating, whatever I'm doing. If I'm awake, I'm working on something. So it's not me being a lazabout, but I do. That's just where my natural rhythms take me. I don't often get up that early. And it threw me for a loop this week, I tell you.
I know, you acted like somebody made you run a marathon. You're like, I need a nap.
Well, we had also done an immense amount of orders that same day because we were waiting for some guy who's coming to do some work on the house.
Yeah. And they're like, is anybody going to be available at 4:45? I mean, that's kind of the mid period of my day.
And look, I'm so happy to have someone come do it. I'll get up, whatever, sure, I'll wake up. But as I got up early, while we're waiting for the guy and while he was doing his work, so he says, well, we might as well work on some of these book orders, these pre-orders we had. Good news is we got them all done.
Yeah, we did a lot in one day, yeah.
Yeah, all the book pre-orders are finished. If you pre-ordered I Have Never Minded the Loneliness, it's in the mail now, or some people have already gotten. I've been seeing people on Instagram, they've already been getting them. I Have Never Minded the Loneliness, Hermits and Their Stories. It's my new book. You can order it directly from us. There's a link in the show notes to get it from us, from our Etsy shop. It'll come signed. It's also on Amazon. It's wherever you get books. A couple people told me they saw it in their local bookstores. That's amazing. I'm very excited about that. Yeah, I always love to hear that. Like, I love that little local booksellers are ordering it in. I Have Never Minded the Loneliness, Hermits and Their Stories. Over 300 pages, stories about hermits, tons of photos of hermits, and what I feel are my best illustrations I've done for any of my books so far. So
there's one part of it I really wish you would have included, which is the how-to. How to get yourself a little shack somewhere and how to get rid of all the other people in the world.
Well, I haven't mastered that yet. So super excited about that. Wes was nice enough to have me on Sasquatch Chronicles, making the rounds. I should be on, I was on Monster Fuzz too. They were nice enough to have me on.
And Soraya's show?
I will be on Soraya, I think coming up. I think maybe this week. I don't think he published that yet. And then I'm going to be hitting a few other podcasts around soon.
If you know any hermit podcasts that would
any hermit podcasts, any history podcasts, anybody wants to talk to me about hermits, I'm happy to do so. I really would like to get the word out about this book, so you can contact me. All my contact information is at strangefamiliars.com. All right, on tonight's show, I'm going to be talking with George, and he has these stories of growing up in a haunted house. And it really does seem like a legit haunted house because it's not one of those things where like he has all these experiences, then he moves away from that house and he continues to have experiences. He said once he moved out, kind of stopped.
State specific.
Yeah.
And did other people in the family have
experiences? Yeah. And there's another story that he tells it happens in the same house, but it sure kind of sounds like an ET thing as well. So it's a really neat story. Lots of stories, but it's all focused on this one property. This one haunted house. And after we talk to George, we're going to be reading a couple stories from listeners. I was trying to put together another listener story show. George's interview was a little shorter than some of our interviews, so I just thought, well, we'll do a couple listener stories with this. If you have a story, first of all, I'd love to talk to anybody on the show who has these experiences. I love talking directly to the witnesses. But I know some people, they don't want to come on the show for various reasons. Either they're shy or they're afraid they're going to be recognized or they just don't like to speak publicly, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to share your story and you actually don't want to be a guest, we're happy to read it. So you can send it in. Just send it in to our email and just make a note, story to read on Strange Familiars or story to read or whatever make it clear that it's okay for us to read it. Any kind of strange experiences you have, we'd love to hear your stories. You can send those to strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com. And again, that's in the show notes as well. All the contact information is at strangefamiliars.com. All right, let's go ahead and get to George's stories. I'd like to welcome George to Strange Familiars. How you doing tonight?
Great, Tim. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to get these stories, which seems like it involves a haunting and then more. So I guess just lay the groundwork. As much as you're comfortable, you can tell us about when and where this happened. You don't have to be too specific if you don't want to.
No, I'll give you I'll ground it where it was. I mean, my father and mother bought a house after living in Philadelphia until I was 3. They bought a house in the Philadelphia suburbs, the western suburbs, close suburbs, called the Main Line. And it had been empty for a number of years. It was this massive Gothic Victorian house that was super impractical, but my father got it for a steal. And he was very friendly with an antique dealer, and he kind of set a guy up in business. So he just kept getting like all this furniture that was like period furniture to go in a house like this. So I think he couldn't resist.
Wow.
And moved in 1972. And the first thing that happened was my mother, I'm at home, I'm 3, maybe 4. And my mother starts hearing piano music from the great, I don't know what to call it, great living room, I guess. Formal living room.
Mm-hmm.
No piano in there, but she hears piano music, and every time she goes to the door, it stops. So on another day, somebody was there working on the porch, like rehabbing one of the porches. And she heard the piano music again, and she went and got him and said, just, come with me so make sure I'm not crazy here. Do you hear piano music? And he did. And they went to the door again. And lo and behold, once they got there, it stopped. And I mean, rounding out the piano, probably in 1975, they put a piano in the spot where there had been a piano. And that music was never heard from again.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, in the old pictures of the house, in this big, like, it's not a bay window, but there was a part where the windows were at like a geometric angle and it jutted out, and it was to fit a piano. Put it there and never heard that stuff again. So other things that happened on a consistent basis, I'll just throw them out there. I mean, it was a benign sort of presence. It was a helpful presence. On more than one occasion, like my parents would be out, it would be the summer, outside of Philadelphia, and it's hot as hell. And they'd leave the windows all open and, go out somewhere, thunderstorm. And like, oh boy, we better get back, close the windows. They'd come back and all windows were closed.
Huh.
Bathtubs left running, turned off. house guests. My parents had, a number of friends who were foreign. They were like, I remember a Dutch couple and a Swedish couple. Sometimes they would come and they would stay, for a week or whatever. And every foreigner reported without any kind of prompting that they really thought someone was in their room.
Huh.
So also my sister, one day my mother went out to talk to some people doing some tree work, and my sister was sick, running a temperature, in bed, probably 3 years old. And my mother had to go out and tell these guys like which trees to drop or which trees to prune. My father wasn't there, he was at work. And when she came back in, my sister told my mother that someone came in and checked on her. That a lady came in and checked on her.
Huh.
And the presence that was seen by a number of people was, from what we can gather, like an Irish housemaid or, I don't know, nursemaid or some kind of domestic help. Like going through the books and with a member of the family that built the house that was still alive. I know my mother talked with her, and this woman who was still alive, probably in her 80s, knew of, that her family had these domestics from Ireland who lived in the attic.
Wow.
And this entity was seen on a number of occasions, not by me, and I don't think by my family, but like visitors to the house or people who were staying there. They'd ask, like, who did I just see, walking through the hall in period clothing?
Oh, wow.
And it was, benign almost all the way. Somebody broke into the basement while we were away one summer, and my father saw the light on in the basement when he came home, and he called the police. Police showed up, went down there, said, yeah, someone broke in on one side of the house and they broke out the other side of the house. They didn't get into the house
Right.
upstairs.
Right. Yeah.
I know there was a heavy bolt on the basement door, so that could have stopped them, but they left their tools. The cops were like, they didn't spend very long here.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Also, my father's side of the family was a very mysterious group, and they came from England, and I'd never met any of them. But once, again, while we were away, my grandmother brought my grandfather's sister to see the house because she thought that, it would be nice for her to see this house, visiting America for like the one time she'd been. And my grandmother let her into the house. My grandmother didn't get around very well, so she just let her in. And this woman, I can't even remember what her name was, spent maybe 3 minutes in there and then came back in the house, and then came back outside and got in my grandmother's car and was ashen and upset. And, my grandmother asked, like, what happened? And she said, I was going up the main staircase there. There was a dollhouse at the top of the stairs. And I wanted to go look at it. And she said she got, 2/3 of the way up and just felt like she was turned back. She felt extremely uncomfortable and left the house immediately.
So for you, growing up in this house, was there any issue? Or like, was it eerie being in this old Victorian house surrounded by all this Victorian furniture? Did you have a feeling that something was there? Or it's just, no, this is where I live. This is where I grow up.
I just accepted it. It's like, when something would happen, and there's a lot more, I'll tell you. It's sort of a laundry list, but I'll tell you.
Sure, yeah.
All the things. I mean, some of the things are stranger than others, and the things that I experienced are the things that I experienced, and
Mm-hmm.
they really impressed me. So we housed Villanova students. Well, that gives away the town we're in, but I don't care. We had Villanova students, because we lived very close to the campus, who would rent out the rooms in the attic. They were pretty big rooms, substantial spaces up there. And we never had any problem with anybody at all. Everybody was great. But there was this one guy, he was on the track team at Villanova, good program, real smart kid, unbelievably healthy. And he just had the weirdest run of luck, and odd things happened to him while he stayed with us. Like, this guy was, 150 pounds. He was a long distance runner. And he would sit in like an overstuffed chair and it would fall apart. And he would apologize to us, like, I don't know what happened. Very weird morning. He came down. We were all at the breakfast table. He came down with his bedding and apologized because there was two holes burned through the bedding.
Wow.
And he doesn't know how it happened. He got up in the middle of the night and he wasn't, he didn't smoke or do anything. He was, a college track star.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And he was really sheepish about it. It's like, I don't know. Cause we let them just we had all these extra linens and stuff. We just let them use them.
Sure.
And he brought him down and threw 4 layers, like the cover sheet for the mattress and a blanket. And we just, when things like this would happen, we would just like nod and yeah. It wasn't like a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
But the things just kept accruing that would happen. And it was just clear that what was going on. There's some kind of activity. The things that happened to me, on more than one occasion, I would get a serious drop in temperature and a heavy perfume smell. Like a 20-degree drop in temperature in seconds. And a very heavy perfume smell would hit me. I'd be sitting in my room playing, and this chill and smell would arrive.
Would they come together?
Yeah, they did. They arrived together. That happened on at least 2 occasions for me. The last incident that happened to me while I was still in high school, we had cats. And in the big formal dining room, we had like a lot of plants, and we would hide the cat box behind this wall of plants. And the cats made it a huge mess in there. There was stuff strewn about, cat doo-doo flung around. And I went in and cleaned it up, swept it up, walked out of the dining room, and the top of the ice bucket somehow got all the way across the room and hit the wall and fell to the floor with a big clatter. And this is an ice bucket, that sits. This was an old ice bucket that, sat. There's no way it could have fallen or, pushed it, or it got off one side from the sideboard and hit a wall and hit the floor. And I turned back and I think I probably just nodded and shrugged. It's like, I guess you didn't like that mess. I think I'll mix in because there's more stories that are like this along this level of, benign and helpful for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Haunting type stories. And there is one more thing that happened to me when I was in college that my father experienced as well. That was definitely some kind of like, I don't know. I've heard people refer to like plasma in the air or something.
Mm-hmm.
One day, I think I'd graduated college maybe, and I was back there and I was playing some music quite loud. And I walked down the big hallway and I walked into some air that felt like it was so thick and so heavy. Sound was different in it, and you could walk in and out of it.
Interesting.
And I told my father to, come out of the kitchen and just walk down the hall. And he walked into it too. And I've sometimes heard that like there's some kind of plasma or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but some kind of effect when these things are materializing. And I have no idea what that was. There was no like electrical socket there. It felt like standing next to a very powerful generator.
Wow.
Like there was almost a hum when you were in that cloud.
And you could step out of it and step back into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
One day I called it like the wall of stink. I was on the trail and I could step into this horrible smell and step out of it and you wouldn't smell it. And you could step in and smell it and you could even cross through it to the other side. And you'd smell it for 2 feet and then you step out the other side and you wouldn't smell it. It was like only in this specific area. It's very, very interesting that you could step in and out of it like that.
Was it the classic, scent that's suggested for Sasquatch?
Yeah, it was, that kind of BO and dead stuff. And yeah, it was a very unpleasant smell.
Possibly, something they spray or they put off, on command, probably to
possibly
warn people.
Yeah, it's possible.
So I'm going to mix in the massive outlier.
Okay.
So I think I was 12 and my friend was sleeping over, and at some point, I don't know when, I found myself staring out my window. I had gotten up and I was staring out my window, and it was incredibly bright outside. And I asked myself in my head, why are you looking out the window? And I answered myself in my head, don't worry about it. And time was very fuzzy for this. Like, I don't know how long I was standing there, but, let's say not long after I was staring out the window into this incredibly bright night. I mean, it would have been the brightest of full moons, but it was brighter than that.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. It felt like the entire yard outside my window was illuminated, and there were no lights out there. We didn't have any lights out there. We had lights on the porches, but they weren't, they didn't cast any kind of light for any kind of distance.
Right.
And so I'm standing there having this odd interior monologue with myself, asking myself questions and answering them myself. And I hear the door fly open with incredible force. Now, this is, a Victorian house with, 12-foot ceilings, I guess. And the doors were thick, heavy, solid wood doors.
So this is the door to your room or the door to the house itself?
Door to my room.
Okay.
Door to my room flies open and hits against my bed and shudders on its hinges. I have no reaction. But I turn, it was like I was unfazed. I turned to my left and I saw a figure enter the room. Figure was maybe 4 feet tall, maybe. Kind of cruised in almost like it was sliding. And the weirdest thing about it was I was looking at it, but it was like it was scrambled to my vision.
Oh, wow.
I could see, I could almost see where there might have been limbs, but there was like, when you would scramble somebody's face, who's on trial or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was like. And that thing you know, stopped, made an extremely strange noise, which I could only describe as a kind of a liquidy clicking kind of sound.
Oh, weird.
And, probably within another less than 5 seconds, exited the room, slamming the door with unbelievable force. And my friend who was sleeping over was terrified. His mother had to be called. He had to go home.
So did he witness this?
He did.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But one of the weirdest things, and the more I think about this, nobody ever talked about this.
Huh.
My parents didn't talk about it. I remember hearing my friend screaming downstairs, like, terrified. I guess my mother was down there with him. And I was just standing in the hallway upstairs, blank.
Wow.
Complete. Like, I don't think my heart rate changed when this door came flying open and shuttered and this thing came in. And that's kind of how it went. And it wasn't like we didn't try to figure out what it was. It was just like, oh, that's a ghost thing.
Huh.
And it seemed acceptable. And I was like, oh, okay. And nobody ever talked about it.
Wow. Never talked with your friend about it again?
I don't remember if I talked to him about it, but he never came over again.
That'll do it.
Yeah. And, well, later, I think I might have been about 17. And one evening I was talking with my father. And I said, hey, do you remember that time that something burst into my room? And, I described to him again, like what happened, because it's not like something we talked about with any regularity. It was just sort of sloughed off. Like, well, it's a ghost. Another one of those things.
Right.
But he pondered what I was saying, and he told me what had happened to him when he was in college. He was driving back from the coast of Connecticut to Wesleyan University. And at some point, he was being followed by some lights. And he thought the lights were very odd. And he says he stopped his car, got out of his car, got back into his car, and went back to school and lost 3.5 hours.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah. And he had never told me that. And he was pretty obsessed with the subject. He had any book you could think of. I think in the 70s, there were a lot of like sort of pop culture paperbacks.
Yeah.
Like, Zachariah Stitchin and like maybe John Keel. He had all that stuff. And we just thought, oh, those are his, my mother called them his creep books. But he, without ever saying anything until that time, he had a deep interest in that subject.
Yeah. And the fact that he told you that story as you're reminiscing about that other one would suggest to me that at least he connected that incident to.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to try to boil it down, like it was almost like some kind of follow-up, maybe. Like they were there to, I don't know, take some kind of test, something from my father. And I was just some collateral awake kid in the other room.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no sense that I was taken. I never have. It always went from I'm standing looking out the window into a disturbingly bright night, and I am in a state I've never been in before or again.
Do you remember the moments preceding looking out the window?
I don't. I came to consciousness staring out the window, not with a start, but just like blank.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why are you looking out the window? Like, it wasn't even why am I looking out the window? It was why are you looking out the window? Don't worry about it, was the answer.
Wow.
And then an unknown amount of time went by before the entry and the exit of the thing.
Wow.
One of the reasons I wanted to try to figure out the chronology is there was another UAP related thing that I experienced that was very strange, and I'd even forgotten about it. And I don't know how close it was to this event, but there was another time where I woke up and became fixated on one of the, let's see, how many panes of glass were there? I think there was 24 panes of glass. You can see them in the picture of the house. And I just was in my bed and I just sat up and I became fixated on one of the panes. I went right to one of the panes, and looking through that pane, I saw what I at first thought was a star. But then I just watched this star do zigzags, shoot all over the place, impossible angles. Probably watched it for about 3 minutes, and then I just went back to sleep. And it was something woke me up and directed me to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was absolutely not anything. I don't know what it was, but whatever it was doing something that is, impossible by the laws of physics.
Right. Yeah.
And that one pane, I was like, we should look through that pane of glass. That's basically the story.
This night that the thing burst into your room, did your friend was terrified. Did he end up like going home that night, like calling his parents and going home that night, to your recollection?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, my memories from this are strange. They're like segmented, and it's like he went like running out of the room. I'm standing there, like nonplussed, like whatever. Like I had no reaction.
Wow.
And I do remember standing in the lit up hallway upstairs, hearing him like crying, and just standing in the middle of the hallway, like so blank, just like, And then, that something like this would happen and then just not be talked about.
Right. Yeah.
That's the thing. It used to just creep me out that I had no reaction. But then I was like, how come we weren't talking about this?
Yeah.
It was just the ghost.
Right.
But something came in and, it wasn't a dog. It was something opened the door with I don't know how you would open a door that way. I mean, it's almost like you'd have to hit it with a blast of energy while turning the handle. And it was so loud, it like cracked against my bed and shuddered.
I wonder if he saw the same thing you saw. Like if we could interview him, I wonder, or if he saw, maybe it wasn't scrambled for him,
I don't know. And another one of the problems, I don't have any memory of talking to him about it.
Right. Right. Which isn't, you'd think that would be unusual, but it's not. You hear that a lot where people just never, certain people, they have these experiences and they just never talk about it again.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like, I don't know, it just rolled into the, the litany of all the other things.
Mm-hmm.
Of which, there's some other, quote unquote ghost stories I can't even recall at this moment. But that they happen on such a consistent basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was just it's like something that came with the house.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was my next question is, did at some point your family move from this house
Yes.
and nothing seemed to follow?
No.
Yeah.
Nope. Nothing. I haven't had any kind of anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I've moved around a lot, on the East Coast. Live outside of New York now.
When you were young, did you ever have sleep paralysis?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, if you don't know, you probably didn't. It usually sticks with you pretty hard. So,
No, I don't think so. Sleeping has never been an issue. I mean, there was growing up in that house, there was no air conditioning, and in the summer it was gross and hot. But otherwise, sleeping was never a problem.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I wish my father was still around that I could, plumb him for more information
Yeah.
if he had some to give. I wonder what his thoughts were that he, never shared that with me of his own volition. He just finally sort of gave in when I mentioned trying to rehash and go over in my mind at age 17 what the hell that was that happened when I was 12.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. My mom passed as well, and she was, in general, a pretty nervous woman. She was nervous and concerned and easily scared. I remember she was deathly afraid of snakes. But more than once, when it comes to weird stuff, she was exceedingly calm. Like I've told the story on the show. Like she woke me up when I was probably about 8 years old. She woke me up, said, "You want to see a UFO?" Took me outside and watching a UFO. Another time there was a weird light, floating down in the back of the farm. I said, "Hey, what's that?" And she very casually said, "Oh, that's a will-o'-the-wisp," and just
Oh yeah,
kind of just very casual about it. And want to talk to her about that. Like she seemed like she seemed like almost she was afraid of her own shadow. But when it came to that stuff, she was very matter of fact about it. Now, was she doing that to keep me calm? Was she terrified inside and just? But I can't imagine she was if she woke me up and took me out to see this UFO.
Well, maybe she could sense that wasn't going to do any harm of any kind.
I don't know. These are the questions I would love to ask her, but I wasn't deeply into this stuff. By the time I got deeply into this stuff, she was in a nursing home and a little bit beyond questioning.
Right.
Her memory wasn't good at all at that point. So,
I just remembered one other ghost thing that happened.
Sure.
That was almost like right out of like the Amityville Horror.
Oh yeah, love to hear.
Although it, didn't. It's another thing. It's just like didn't phase us. It's like, oh, okay. We had a nice girl who went to college nearby, a Catholic college nearby. She lived up there, and her sister lived up there at other times. Very nice. And she was always hanging around. And I think she came into the kitchen while we were eating dinner, and she noticed this, like a ceramic, I don't know what you'd call it, a mold, like with it that had a black boar as its lid. Very ornate, very nice looking. A little creepy looking. Had like red eyes. And she asked, "Can I take a look at that?" And we're like, "Sure." And it was up a little bit high. She had to get on her tiptoes, but she could reach it. But before she got it, it like jumped off the shelf and landed behind her.
Huh. It breaks.
Shattered.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, behind her, like at her feet.
Wow.
Yeah, shattered. And that was, she was so apologetic. She didn't know what she did.
Yeah.
Didn't know if she did anything. And now that I think about it, much later, I think she really liked living there because she brought back her boyfriend who, I don't know, I think he fancied himself as, like I was born with a veil. Or, he said he could sense things. He was British.
Mm-hmm.
And she brought him to the house, and he professed that he was having, a sensation that there were things going on there. But I didn't know what to make of him, but
Mm-hmm.
this is like during college, a whole bunch of my friends came back, and of course they see the house. What's the first thing they want to do? Ouija board.
Ah. Okay.
So I'm like, okay, all right. So we go to the basement, which was so creepy. It's like a catacombs down there. And we're down there, and I don't know, they're doing it. I'm ignoring it because it seemed ridiculous. But at one point in the festivities, my friend Francois said, like something like yelled out, give us a sign, because I don't know, maybe nothing was working with the Ouija board. And at that moment, my friend Steve walked in to the house. I could hear him upstairs. He was coming over to join us. And he came to the basement stairs and promptly fell down the stairs.
Ooh.
And he hadn't had a drink yet. And he had no idea what happened to him.
Wow.
And that was within 15 seconds of Francois yelling, give me a sign.
Wow. Was he hurt or was he okay?
He was limping, but he was really puzzled as to why he fell down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were my friends from college were impressed.
I guess so. Yeah.
It was just like, oh, okay. Well, there you go. There you have it.
Did you generally tell people like, hey, I live in a haunted house?
People knew.
Mm-hmm.
People knew. Like if, when, kids I grow up with would come over, it's like, it's the Munsters house.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And, complete with the furniture and like no comfortable place to sit anywhere. That was the worst part of it. The house was great, but it was, we didn't have like a place where you could sit and watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
It was like uncomfortable, everything.
That's the Victorian stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super, super uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's my wife. She loves the fancy Victorian lighting and furniture. So everything's uncomfortable and dim.
Yeah. You can, if you want to like add some flavor to this, you can look at the story of the house. It's pretty interesting. It was like the one house designed by a guy who just did Catholic churches, because he came to live with the family while I think he was designing the chapel at Villanova University.
Okay.
I think that's what it was. So in the initial house, which was, I think, built in the 1730s, sort of a farmish house, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The foundation of that house was in, part of the foundation was encased in this house. And while he stayed there, I guess this family commissioned him to design them this crazy one-of-a-kind house. And there was really no other house like it. It was a one-off.
Yeah, it looks amazing. Just looking at the photos of it.
Yeah, it was impossible to heat. But I liked growing up there. I thought it was cool.
Yeah, yeah.
I took, as I got older, I loved taking care of the grounds. We had about 3 acres, and there's lots of formal plantings, and so I got into that. It was very cool. And I remember my parents also thinking there might have been a male apparition. They've speculated out loud that there might have been one, but I think the one that, was really trackable was the female.
Yeah.
Was the woman.
Yeah.
The woman that dropped in on my sister.
Right. Right. Yeah. So
asked her how she was doing.
Other than her and the whatever came through your door, did you guys see the entities?
No.
No, it's just more like just this, just the things moving and flying across the room and such.
House guests, like I said, house guests would experience.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I know at least 2 occasions she was seen like walking through the hallway, like, and people are like, "Who is that?" Like, who's who? So, do you want my wife's family's very probable Sasquatch story?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty good, and it's funny because, like, when they told me what happened, I was like, "Well, I mean, that's Sasquatch." And like, "Oh no, I don't know about that." So here's the factors. This was late 70s, Raleigh, North Carolina, but the distant, like right on the city limit, but it was like total country.
Mm-hmm.
Raleigh hadn't turned into sprawly.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this old farm that they had, had slave graves on it. And they lived there. They had like, it was like a gentleman's farm. They had some animals and so on. My wife's sister was probably about 17. And on 2 occasions, she had a peeping Tom.
Huh.
I never got the detail of what she thought that peeping Tom was.
Mm-hmm.
But within a week, my wife and her brother, younger brother by a year, were playing hide and seek outside. And my wife was hiding and her brother was looking. And my wife was around a tree somewhere off in the distance, and she watched her brother like creep into a stand of bushes that was right off, I guess, their driveway. And, she's like, he really thought that she was in there. And 5 seconds later, he came tearing out, apoplectic, and just went in the house and jumped into his mother's lap and just cried and cried and cried. And all he could say was he saw 2 big hairy feet.
Oh, wow.
And then they started hearing strange sounds and getting the smell. And I know my father-in-law told me he just went and locked all the doors and windows and they just sort of, I don't know, I guess you don't think it's Sasquatch at that time.
Yeah. I would think not, maybe.
But when I, particularly the geographical location of this probably would have been a route to go around whatever metropolis Raleigh was at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This would be skimming the outskirts, headed to wherever in North Carolina.
Well, not so much anymore, but I was initially shocked at how close to houses, neighborhoods, this activity can be. I think when I first started it, I would be like, oh, you got to be deep in the wilderness. But very often, some of the most intense experiences we've had have been within eyeshot of people's houses.
Sure. And, one of their great advantages is, understanding how poor our vision is.
Yeah.
All they have to do, hold still in some shadow and some light, never see them.
It's amazing.
Our vision's not good enough.
They did that experiment. The Olympic Project did that experiment with that guy in the goofy Halloween store Bigfoot costume. And they gave people, I don't know, they had 12, 15 people with cameras, all different kinds of cameras. And he was out in the woods and they said, go take photos of him. And he said, as long as he stood still, this is in a goofy, like kind of orangutan orange kind of colored Halloween store Bigfoot suit. He said, as long as he stood still, they'd walk right by. So people are not incredibly observant. I know we think we are, but we're not. If things stay in the shadows and stay still, it's very often we will walk right by him. Yeah,
I'm sure, how many, probably even you've probably walked within 10 feet of one and not seen it.
I am certain I probably have. I think I've been a lot closer to him than I would like to think, honestly.
I'm sure you have. I mean, you wrote the book, Pennsylvania Sasquatch, right?
Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, yeah.
Bigfoot in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
That must have been interesting to put together and fun.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's great fun. I got to get back to those historical books someday, but I have a couple other books I need to finish up first. So how long did this sort of, I don't even want to call it Class B activity because her brothers saw feet. That takes it beyond Class B. How long did this activity occur around their home?
I think it was just over a week.
That's so interesting. It's just there and gone.
Yeah, and the peeping Tom, I don't think it was a peeping Tom.
Right. Yeah, that's happening around the same time as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's some creepy Bigfoot behavior, but it is Bigfoot behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds. And when they told me that story, I was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds about right for the big fella."
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But just watching kids playing, hopefully not thinking of taking them and eating them, but just watching.
You never know that. That's when it gets creepy. The stories of them watching kids, beckoning kids, or that's the stuff where it's like, really, like what is happening with that?
Well, it could be an old and sick one just looking for an easy meal.
That's horrifying to think about.
Yeah, well, hey, they're top of the food chain.
Yeah. Well, George, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Sure. If I was better sorted out, I know my mother wrote an article. She used to be the editor of her college magazine, and she wrote an article about all this. And I should have gotten it. I could get it from her when I see her.
Yeah.
I could share with you if there was more that I'm not recalling.
Oh,
but
yeah.
She put it all down in a article for this college magazine.
Oh, please,
alumni magazine.
Yeah, if you can find it, we'll and it's okay with you and with her, we'll go ahead and read it on the air.
Sure, I will get that. She still lives in the area, so down there. So,
great.
But I'll see her within the next 6 weeks. I know.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Strange Familiars is brought to you by our patrons. Thank you, patrons. Thank you so much. We could not make Strange Familiars without your help. If you like Strange Familiars and you'd like to help us make the show and get extra content besides, you can become a patron at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. All of our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly shows, plus extra content. We do full extra episodes, at least one a month for our patrons. You can check it out at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. Patreon patrons get another bonus this year, and that is to help us with a paranormal experiment. We recorded the sort of opening episode where we sort of discuss the ideas of what we want to do and how we want to include the patrons. That should be this month's patron episode. It should be out very soon. I'm excited to share that with the patrons, and I'm excited to get the patrons' ideas and input on this paranormal experiment. So that's another bonus for becoming a patron. Again, it's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. There's also an option on Apple Podcasts. It's called Patron of the Strange there. Apple Podcast subscribers get the commercial-free weekly episodes and the extra episodes monthly as well. And once again, thank you, patrons, wherever you're signed up. It's a huge help. All right, let's get to these listener stories. And Allison,
Have you made sure to include lots of words that I will fumble?
yes, I contacted this person and I said, can you
Specifically
please
said-
record a lot of First Nations name?
That Allison will sound like an idiot in pronouncing.
Yes, but it is a Bigfoot story
Well, there you go. I'm willing to
about
risk it.
Sabe. See, she included the pronunciation. I thought it was Sabe.
Mhm.
Their word for Bigfoot is it's pronounced Sabe. So I led you down the wrong road already in terms of pronunciation. So do not listen to me.
Okay. I'm going to wing it, and I'm just going to offer apologies.
This is a story about Sabe from Josephine.
I'd also like to just apologize to Canada generally. Okay, this is from Josephine. My name is Josephine. I'm 25 years old from Sagking, Manitoba, and I have 2 unique Sasquatch or Sabe stories to share with you. In our culture, Sasquatch is not considered a cryptid, as more like a friendly spirit or trickster. We call it Sabe, and they are as real as the bear or moose is to us, just another living thing on this large continent. Sabe is described as a large bipedal ape with a horrible body odor. He smells like musty old furs or wet dog, meaning you usually smell them before you see them. Sabe is greatly honored, and sometimes their presence is welcomed into certain ceremonies. When or if you hear them speak, they are said to speak an old extinct dialect of either Cree or Ojibwe. But mostly, they are silent, apart from the odd whooping and hollering you may hear when they communicate with each other across the tree lines. It's important to note that these teachings are Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and because each tribe is so different, I'm not sure how other indigenous groups feel about Sabe. A little bit of backstory from my experience. It takes place at my family's log cabin in remote Lake of the Woods, Ontario, where we would live most of the summer. We loved it there and felt so at home. My father's maternal relatives were originally from that area of northern Ontario, but he didn't find this out until he started to get to know the locals in the area, which explains why we all felt so drawn to this place. When I was 10 or 11, my father and I were walking up the hills behind our cabin to check out an old fox burrow when we heard the snap of a tree. Silently and without acknowledging our presence, a large Sabe walked across the trail and back into the bush. He was about 8 meters away from us and stood at least 2 feet taller than my father, 6 feet. We were completely frozen in our tracks, and my dad grabbed my arm and we turned around. It's not so much that we were fearing for our lives, but we knew that we had obviously walked too far into the woods and it was time to head home. My dad put out tobacco that evening when we got back to the cabin, and he gave me the teaching of the Sabe. I don't even think we told my mom and siblings until much later as to not worry them. We would be sleeping there for at least another month. The encounter felt like something meant just for us. And 30 years plus ago at that same cabin, my aunt, who is by all means a skeptic, woke up in the middle of the night to get a glass of water. As she's standing at the kitchen sink, she can feel the glass shutter above her, shaking under the breath of a large animal. As she looks up, she makes direct eye contact with a large Sabe. This is shocking enough, but the part that really frightened her is that the windows are high up on the cabin, as the main story is all cement and cold storage. This creature was large enough to look into a second-story window and make direct eye contact with my aunt. She is an Indigenous, so she was pretty shaken by the incident. She didn't have the teachings we grew up with to bring her any comfort. She said she will never forget its dark, close-together eyes, squinting back at her before she stepped back in fear and it was gone. Thank you for taking the time to read my story. I have attached a picture of the cabin below so you can see for yourself the estimated height of the Sabe in my aunt's story. The one my dad and I saw was significantly smaller. That's a fantastic story.
Yeah. First of all, I love her story.
Mm-hmm.
I love that they just turned around. So, okay, it's not for us at this time. And they went back.
We've gone too far into the woods. Like it was a sign that we kind of stumbled onto someone else's
tobacco and just, it's a big deal, but not a big frightening deal, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's an opportunity to teach about it. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Her aunt's story. Things looking in the window.
Why is that so? There's something about that. It's because you're being watched, right? For one,
mm-hmm.
you're not complicit in it. Like it's not like I'm watching this thing and this thing is watching me. It's that there are times when something is watching you and you have no idea that they're watching you, and then you realize it.
Yeah, you like open windows in the day because you love to let light in.
Mm-hmm.
I will go around as soon as it gets dark. I will go around and pull those shades down. I do not like people or anything else. Like I never have.
Because it's fun to look at. I mean, I'm not a peeping Tom.
Sure.
but it like if someone has an open window and you're driving by, you're like, well, I want to see what their house looks like.
What does their house look like?
Yeah. I don't like walk around deliberately to look in people's windows, but like I'm not going to look away.
Yeah. See, that's why I walk around naked from the waist down all the time.
Because that's a deterrent.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone doing it.
You're only going to do it once.
No, but I've long been creeped out by the idea of things looking and there's so many Bigfoot stories of that, that it's just like, oof, just the idea.
Is it levitating? Is it that big?
Looking up and just seeing something looking like that.
Well, it's kind of like any of those like sort of misplaced nighttime visitors too, where it's just like when they're staring at you, like if something's being very aggressive, that there's a response to aggression, right? There's a couple choices that you have to make. But if you can't read what's going on, that's almost more terrifying in a way because you have no plan of action.
Yeah.
But I'd love to go. I have relatives in Ontario. I mean, I've never been to Canada, but I do have relatives, and my grandfather grew up in Canada for reasons.
For reasons
that
written from the law.
It's a fun story. It's a fun story. My family was pretty, I think, embarrassed about, but now I think is one of those sort of colorful, fun stories. But because of certain intrusive laws in the United States, my grandfather's father had to leave the country, and so he grew up most of his years in Canada, and then his sibling stayed in Canada, in Ontario. And then their families continued to live in Ontario. And my grandfather came back to this area. And the reason we are in this town right now is because at one time it had the most millionaires per capita.
Because of cigars.
But that time is long since gone.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how far away from that. How many millionaires per capita do you think we have in Redline right now?
No clue.
We got a lot of thousandaires, though. We've got to have some thousandaires.
There's definitely some thousandaires, for sure.
But yeah, I would love to know what Ontario looks like.
Well, let's go. This one is from Amanda. She's got a story that she has titled The Stationary Plane.
I hope it's about letters. I live in Springfield, Missouri, which resembles most Midwestern cities while in the town proper, but once you leave the city limits, quickly becomes the country, farmland, and natural resources area. I was driving to my book club meeting one evening in October of 2023, which was being held at the home of one of the members who lives at the edge of a small town, 25-ish miles north of the city. I was quite enjoying the drive, passing dense Ozarks woods, rolling cattle fields, and the smaller and smaller towns on the way there. There was still 20 or so minutes of light left as I was making my way down a 2-lane road, flanked by thick tree line only about 10 feet to either side of the road, with grass in the intervening space. Up ahead was a break in the woods to the left, where I could start to make out a driveway to a house, and then a length of fence to the other side of it, which was the front to a field that might have held cows or sheep, but I didn't notice any of that. What happens next happens in the span of maybe 20 seconds, so a lot of my reactions are split-second thoughts followed by being completely dumbfounded. As I got closer to the property, I noticed a large object in the sky, which startled me because my initial reaction was that it might be a plane flying dangerously low over the field, just feet above the tips of the tallest trees of the woods behind it. Just a moment passed when I realized my initial reaction of it being a plane was correct, because as I got closer to it, I realized it was a World War II-era bomber plane. As I identified the plane with my mind, I simultaneously realized that it was not in motion, but rather suspended in midair above the field. I had already let off the gas and was beginning to brake due to the surprise, so I was coming up alongside the plane, not even 100 feet to my left on the road at maybe 20 miles an hour, and slowing. I was incredulous at what I was seeing, thinking maybe it was some kind of hyper-realistic giant kite. But searching for signs of this, I realized there weren't any people out in the field or yard of the house or any ropes holding it in place, and later realized there wasn't any breeze at all. As I'm driving, barely looking at the road, but rather hunched down looking out my window up at the plane, trying to soak in all aspects of this profoundly weird circumstance, I rolled down my window to see if I could hear engine noise or anything to make it even vaguely normal. It was entirely silent, save for the sound of my own car. Someone was quickly coming up behind me, and there was no shoulder to pull off onto, so I resigned myself to having to keep on down the road. I was rubbernecking as much as I could to see the plane until the last millisecond. I finally looked forward to make sure I was in my lane and then hunkered down to look out my side mirror at an angle that would catch the space that the plane was in, and it wasn't there. I whipped my head around to look over my shoulder and confirm that there was nothing over the field. I turned back around and stared hard into my rearview mirror, and it too tells me that there wasn't anything there. I kept watching just in case for as long as I could, until the woods started to completely block my view, and the car behind me started to brake hard since I was still going way under the speed limit. I started to pick up speed and was trying to catch glimpses of the driver behind me in my rearview mirror to pick up on any behaviors that would indicate that they too saw something. They were acting completely normal, so I assumed they didn't see what I saw. The rest of my drive was uneventful, and I went on to book club, not telling anyone once I arrived. The drive home was also uneventful, but I don't think I could have exactly pinpointed where it had been on that dark, unfamiliar road anyway. Months later, I told the hosts from that night what I saw, and she said that she's not surprised, and that weird stuff happens out there. I've seen a lot of paranormal and supernatural things throughout my life, including ghosts of all sorts, the sounds of and parting grass for a small, invisible being, almost hitting a shadow person in a hat with my car, UFO and UAPs of all sorts, dancing balls of light in the sky, slow-moving black triangle, points of light in the night sky that should shoot away, and giant ball of light beaming down rays of light. I've smelled Bigfootish smells and had tapping on windows at night, and that said, I still do not have a stationary flying World War II bomber on my 2023 bingo card.
Wow. First of all, give us all those other stories too. Don't just tease us with the one. But thank you, Amanda. That is a neat story. Just a stationary, like World War II bomber. Like if it was a modern plane, you'd be like, well, maybe it was just your angle and the way the atmosphere, and you just thought it was stationary. But it was low, and just hanging there in the sky like that.
Is it just like a point out of time? Like
yeah,
mismatched time?
Yeah.
It reminds me, I know I've mentioned this a million times on the show, but my absolute favorite Gettysburg ghost story is the one.
Time slip.
Yeah, the time slip one where the person's in the elevator and it opens up on a field hospital and they're just watching people's body parts be amputated. And I'm like, oh.
There are so many cool stories of time slips out there. Like, honestly, you'd love them. There's like people are just walking down a street in a town and suddenly they're in a Victorian, marketplace and stuff. And they're just like, what? Everybody's dressed Victorian, like things like that. Or like there's stories out there with that stuff.
They seem like sort of to catch people unaware, like that it's not like you have an idea that all of a sudden you're going to be sucked into another time, but you're just all of a sudden there.
Yeah.
Which I always thought like that one night I had like the craziest sense of deja vu to the point where I was like I think I probably talked about that on the podcast before. One of the weirdest experiences of having deja vu that was so intense that I was like, I couldn't figure out how I'd been there before or what. And I've still been trying to figure out like if that house has something to do with something else I would later become interested. I mean, it's in a very specific part in York City that I do wonder if it has something to do with something I'm interested now in the city, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, I always wondered if at that point I just kept thinking that night we're going to slip into something else, or I'm going to forget this and this is in a different life. It just felt so weird. It's just like, and it wasn't that we were doing anything. I've never really been a drinker. I don't think I was drinking anything. I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't know what caused it. It was just a weird.
Huh.
I don't know. It could have been company I was with. You. I know you were driving me home, so.
You never know. Dangerous thing leaving your house with Tim.
It is. Even more dangerous to stay at home. Next thing you know, you're like, oh, you're going to be the co-host of a paranormal podcast. Oh, okay.
Thanks so much to...
I love those stories.
Yeah, thanks so much to Josephine and Amanda. Great stories.
I like when people just have they were both just the perfectly written, perfectly just told all the details you wanted and with the perfect kind of hook. I loved it. Yeah.
So if you have a story, go ahead and send it in, strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com. Just make a note that it's okay for us to read the story on the show. So for the Curiosity of the Week, we're not doing a Curiosity of the Week. We're introducing a new thing that we're not going to do this every week. But we're going to occasionally pull photos from our collection. How long have we been collecting antique photography, Allison?
Close to 30 years. It was like when we first got married, I think.
I think we just were going to antique stores, so we liked them. And then we just started saying, oh, neat, old pictures are neat. Well, you've always loved it. Like you're turning up pictures of yourself as a kid where you're playing photographer and you're like holding toy cameras and stuff. Like to me, it's like you've always sort of been drawn to photography.
Well, I was just remembering that tonight because my mom's like, do you want to take your old, there was a toy from the 70s called Mr. Machine.
I remember.
70s or 80s. He was like a red plastic guy and he was like, sort of like a robot.
Kind of.
But he looked
almost like a Victorian robot.
Yeah, he looked like a Victorian robot. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, there you go.
Sort of pre-cyberpunk, I guess, or pre-dark Victoriana or
steampunk.
Steampunk, yeah, that's what I was looking for. But I used to pose my sister in this little chair, and then I would pretend he was an old-time camera and take pictures of her. And I would like wind him up and have him start walking as if he was the one that like was taking the like who.
Yeah, I mean,
so
and then you found a photo of yourself recently where you're holding like a little toy camera as a kid, right? Like you look so. I mean, you seem, I don't know, more into that camera than I don't know. It just seems so appropriate there in your hand.
Yeah, there's a couple of pictures of me from I feel like kids are sort of fully formed, like the things they're interested in. And so I have this picture of myself. It was like a camp where you got to like dress up and like, it was like a Victorian kind of like the Historical Society did it. And it was like a day thing and you could dress up in old time clothes for it. So I have this picture of me in like this t-shirt for cereal, like, which is called Halvesies. I don't know if you remember Halvesies cereal. We saved up to get this Halvesies t-shirt.
Was it half one kind and half
another? And so everything themed with it. Like I liked it because it was a real big gimmick. Like they had like, it would come with like a mirrored piece that you'd put on the back so you could make half of it into the whole thing.
Oh, gotcha.
So I liked a good gimmick. I don't know what the cereal tasted like. So I'm wearing like a t-shirt, which you can see a bit of. And then on top of it is like this full Victorian outfit. And I was like, that's kind of me. Some t-shirt for whatever I'm into at the time with a full Victorian outfit on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was fully into like monsters and stuff as a kid. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess you can plot out your future in some way. I don't know how the hermits fit in. I did spend a lot of time alone in the woods.
When you talk about your favorite parts of childhood, they don't involve any of your family. It's always like, I would take my dog out and we'd go spend the day away from my family. That was like the happiest moments.
Fantastic times.
I had a wonderful childhood away from my family.
All right. Well, in any case, we've been collecting antique photos for a long time, and we've amassed like a really cool collection of like some really, really neat images. And a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, something like that, there was a certain image. I was like, oh, should I use this for the Curiosity of the Week? And you were like, no, that's way too cool. Like you need to hang on to that as part of your collection. And we started talking about the idea of like just making prints of some of our favorite images. So that's what we've done from the Strange Familiars collection of photographs. And we're starting to make prints. These are 9x12 prints. They're on nice, heavy paper.
Yeah, they're not like a photocopy. They're
not printed at home. These are professionally printed. You know, we took them and had them printed. And the first one is an antlered owl. Now, our son said, oh, that's a Wolpertinger. And I looked that up. And those tend to be antlered rabbits or antlered hares. I didn't see anything
This seems like it came out of like Brett's head. Something she would draw.
It's a very cool image.
Mhm.
I've never seen anything like it. This came from a real photo postcard from, I'm estimating about 1907, 1909, something like that.
I wonder if it was like a little makeshift museum or something.
It looks like it's taken out in the field somewhere.
So do you think it's just like
I think it's somebody's
like a hoax
taxidermy project or something. Yeah, I don't know.
They didn't have enough parts to make a jackalope, so they just went with
I don't know.
Like, we do have an owl.
It's something's odd with the face too.
Yeah, it was a little creepy.
Yeah, it's a cool looking thing.
To me, I just looked at it, I was like, oh, that's the real like Mothman.
Yeah, it does have Mothman vibes.
Yeah, it does. It's like if he wasn't in shell. Like you always see Mothman has a real like, I always think of him as having sort of like a Dracula kind of component. Like he's always like, shows up, he's like black and red and like, but this seems like if you shone a light on him and you could see all the different parts of him during the day.
I really like this image, and I'm glad you told me to keep the original after all. But the prints are really cool too.
Oh, you can see a lot more detail now that they're bigger.
Yeah, blown them up. They're 9x12. They're ready to go in a mat or a frame. Fairly standard size. That'll be what takes the place of the Curiosity this week, and that's on Etsy already.
Yeah,
there's multiple copies, so
more than one person can get it.
Yeah, you don't have to run there to get them. I think I made 20 of this, and I can reprint them if they sell out. That's the cool thing about this series is, depending on how they sell, we'll reprint them if they sell out.
Yeah, and we've already made I've made some reproductions to fit into antique frames of like some of the other pieces from our collection, but those I do sort of like the way I do exhibits for where I work, and so it's on this particular like almost like.
Yeah, those are much bigger too.
Yeah, they're much bigger.
Much bigger.
These done like 24 by 36.
These are easy to mail, and the price will reflect that. So this is going to be a series. Like I said, we're not going to do one every week. I think we're going to have one for next week because I just did 2 the first time, but it's not going to be every week. We'll get back to our standard Curiosity of the week in a little bit here. But this is the first of the Strange Familiars photo print series. The Antlered Owl. Go ahead and check it out at Etsy. There's an image of it in the show notes. If you click on that, it'll take you to the Etsy shop. There's a watermark on the image because there are notorious image stealers out there. So I put and Etsy requires you to upload a really big image, like big enough to, kind of print off of. So there's a watermark on the Etsy image, but it's not on the print. If you order the print, there's no watermark on it. Links in the show notes. Take you to our Etsy shop where you can purchase that. And past Curiosities of the week, those that are still left, also at Etsy. I've Never Minded the Loneliness. Hermits and Their Stories. It's my newest book. I'm very, very proud of. You can pick that up there as well as my other books, those that are still in print. If you get them from us on Etsy, they'll come signed.
If you're local, I'm going to have them probably in the store in Columbia State Theater by the weekend, and there's
quite possibly in Hanover as well.
Yeah,
we're getting ready to redo the whole stand there at Hanover. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I'll add them in there as well. Yeah, Chad's bringing in the extra clothes racks. We're gonna move things around there.
Yeah, on Saturday, if you're in Columbia, there is 15% off at State Theater for the 1-year anniversary. So.
All right, State Theater Vintage, Columbia, Pennsylvania. It's on.
Locust? Yeah, I think it's on Locust Street.
Locust Street, Columbia, Pennsylvania. Black Rose Antiques is in Hanover. It's in Hanover. No, it's on Eichelberger. Right?
Yeah, it's near the mall.
It's near the mall. It's
such as the mall is these days.
Little strip mall by the mall. There, Black Rose Antiques.
Is it called like the Sherwood Plaza, or is it next to the Sherwood? There's like this old 70s writing that's really cool. Yeah. It says like Sherwood Plaza. I think it's next to the Sherwood
Plaza. It's next to it. I
love those little shopping centers. We used to have one in York that had a Plaid. Do you remember the Plaid? We used to call it the Plaid Shopping Center. It was like a little shopping center.
Yeah.
And we had this really cool. And then within the last couple of years, way past the time that they would have needed to update it, they just painted over it and made it all like beige or something. I was like, well, now it looks. I mean, it's not outdated anymore. It just looks cool. And they're like, well.
So go check that out. Yeah, the Hermit book will be in the antique shops very soon. Check the antique shops if you're in the area. Etsy. Allison interrupted me. Also at Etsy, there's Strange Familiars t-shirts, stickers, patches, and more. All kinds of other stuff. Link to Etsy's in the show notes. Thanks to everybody who pre-ordered the book again. It was a big success. And we'll
We
be
had
back.
some other thank yous, didn't we?
Oh, yes. So someone sent Allison some big... What are those? They're drawings, but they're drawings over photographs. Is
So,
that how
like sometimes called, what are they called? Solar enlargements. Solar enlargements.
So they're done from photographs, but it's...
Yeah, like you add like some charcoal, and usually they're adding details to the clothing, and it makes it look less detailed.
And I'm afraid I threw away the packaging.
Well, I remember what the town was, but I don't want to give away the town. But it was a town in Pennsylvania.
Yes,
There's people, and the people's. I also don't want to talk too much about it. So if their relatives are listening, they're like, "Why did you give Grandma away?"
True. Yeah. But thank you for those.
Yeah.
For those. I threw away the note and the packaging. And
You were in a recycle. You were breaking down boxes.
well,
like
we're
your
trying to
life
get ready
depended.
for this guy to come to do the work, and I didn't want the house to,
Yeah.
So yeah. Plus, we had a million book boxes that I had to break down, and cardboard went out with the recycling.
But I did read the nice note.
Yeah, it was very nice. So thank you so much. I'm sure I'm forgetting something.
Yeah.
I'm sure I owe thanks to many.
Thank
many
you,
folks.
everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with more Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. Strange Familiars is on Facebook, facebook.com/strangefamiliars. You can join the Strange Familiars gathering group there. We're on Instagram, @strangefamiliars, one word, no underscore. Please give us a follow there. I'm not going to pay for that blue check. I want the blue check. This is like that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to pay. It's like $12 a month or something you have to pay Meta just to prove that.
I don't even want a blue check. I'd want a different color.
Wow. I would like people to know, that's us for sure. But
I think it's pretty apparent.
just follow us.
Yeah.
We are @Strange Familiars. One word. What else? For Strange Familiars merch, it's strangefamiliars.com/merch. And for everything else, 24/7, it's strangefamiliars.com.